Everybody hanging in today. I know it's been kind of long and different than what we're used to, but good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are across the state and across the region. Today, I'm going to talk about some economics of small grain management strategies. And really what we're going to talk about here is three topics. One, looking at what we're calling intensive management strategies. So that's looking at various seeding rates and in-furrow phosphorus application. We're going to look at wheat planting and harvesting timing. And this last topic here, keeping wheat or cutting it for hay, is a topic that's been brought up here because of the freeze here recently. And what are the economic considerations that we need to think about on whether or not we do keep it or have the opportunity to cut it for hay and sell it. So we'll go over those three topics here right now. So when we look at the intensive wheat management treatments, all these studies were conducted by Carrie Knott's graduate student or former graduate student, Catherine. Some of you may have seen her at other field days. She took these treatments here at Princeton over 2018 and 19. She looked at different seeding rates at 35 plants per square foot and 56 plants per square foot. And then we looked at various in-furrow phosphorus rates, 0 and then 42 pounds an acre. Some of the things we also need to consider about this is pricing, right? Wheat prices, as they increase or decrease, will impact the economics. So we have a price here of $5.25 a bushel. She used triple superphosphate at $522 a ton. And for our different seeding rates, we had a cost of roughly $16.50 per bag. So what does this look like at the average? So we want to consider our base case. This was a seeding rate of 35 plants per foot squared and 0 phosphorus, in-furrow phosphorus. That had a wheat yield of roughly 74 bushels per acre. We want to use that as the base to compare with these various other management practices. So this is what economists call partial budgeting. Okay, so we want to look at making a change. We have to compare it to a base situation. So what we're looking at here is the base, so seeding rate of 35 plants per foot squared, and that in-furrow phosphorus application of 42 pounds an acre. You can see here in the columns that yielded a little bit better wheat, just barely. But there was the additional cost, right, of the phosphorus application and the additional revenue associated with that increase in wheat yields. And you can see here that that actually lost $17.50 or 15 cents an acre. When we move on to the high seeding rate, okay, so that's at 56 plants per square foot. Again, a little bit of increase in yield. However, those additional costs associated with that seeding rate, again, yielded a negative return. Finally, when we looked at both of these rates, a high seeding rate and an in-furrow phosphorus application, again, similar results. The additional wheat yields did not offset the cost of those applications. So we struggle to find any type of at the means or at the average across all of her field sites, struggle to see a positive return on these. So what we're currently recommending as the base of seeding rate of 25 plants per foot squared seems to be the optimal from an economic perspective. However, but what I found interesting, we did something new this time, is we took all of her data points that she collected over the 2-year period and provided a probability or looked at economic risk. Okay, so we had probably average over 150 observations across site years. And you can see here, you have basically a 40% chance of having positive net returns even though I just said that at the means, you can see those were close to zero. So you can see that distribution of all of these observations that she collected. And this is the base case plus that phosphorus application. Again, 40% chance of having a positive net return. If we looked at the high seeding rate, however, that decreased a little bit to only 35% chance probability of an economic return. And if we looked at the combination of high seeding rate and phosphorus, we see a 21% chance of economic return. So given your risk level and how you perceive risk, I want you to think about this when you're looking at these three management options. Because if you're more risk averse, you may not do any of these. However, if you do want to take a chance, this in-furrow phosphorus application does have the highest probability of a positive net return. So if we move on to her second study, when she looked at planting and harvest timing, again, same location in Princeton in 2018 and 2019. We looked at different planting dates of wheat of October and November, and then looking at a systems approach where we're looking at double crop soybeans. So we're looking at a normal harvest time and an early harvest time for wheat, which then corresponds to a normal and early planting of soybeans. So when we look at wheat harvest, again, I mentioned here that we are looking at no storage and drying. Again, this is really abnormal across the state, but you'll see here I will add storage and drying system in there, because what we want to do is really isolate the impact from a management strategy with what happens if you do have storage and you can dry it down and not take that moisture dockage that we typically see. So what we're going to do is look at the price of soybeans and the price of wheat here at $8.50 a bushel and $5.25 a bushel respectively. And then we took the dockage schedule from Gavilon Grain for grain moisture, test weight, and DON. So again, just like before, we had to have a base case scenario to look at the partial budget scenario. So you can see here October planting and normal harvest time resulted in wheat yields of about 88 bushels an acre and a double crop soybean yield of 52 bushels an acre. So if we first look at that November planting and normal harvest timing, we had pretty significant wheat yield reduction. Okay, that hence had a reduced revenue, and we lost $113 an acre. If we looked at that October planting, however, we have a normal or an early harvest. Again, you can see there below the graph, we have the early harvest there at June 12th. That means we had slightly reduced revenue and a additional revenue on average because of the increase in soybean yields, and that netted out to be a positive $5.21 an acre. Okay. Then we look at November planting and early harvest. Again, much lower wheat yields in this scenario. We had that reduced revenue, again, because we're taking that moisture dockage, okay, from early harvest. And we had that additional revenue because we were able to plant our beans earlier. And that resulted in $121 an acre loss. So out of these three management strategies, our October planting and early harvest is the best scenario between these three decisions, okay? So similar to what we see, I showed you before, basically there's a 45% chance that you are going to have positive net benefits from the October planting early harvest scenario. Again, remember this is without storage and drying. We'll look at that next. Here's the November planting. You have a 15% chance of having increased positive net returns and 13% chance with the November planting and early harvest. So if you look here at these probabilities, again, these are without storage. The most probable option of management strategies is that October planting and early harvest scenario. So here's the same table we have here, but this is with storage and drying. Okay, same prices for beans and wheat, and you may be asking yourself, well, Jordan, why did you use the same price for wheat? Because we can store it and make more money. Yes, that is correct. But what we wanted to do here is really isolate that impact from the management strategy versus a marketing strategy and capturing that carry in the market. So you can see here that October early planting does increase net returns substantially at $35 an acre when we have storage and drying. But what I found more interesting is how it increased the probability of you making positive net returns through this management strategy up to 58%. And you can see here for November planting normal harvest, at normal harvest, we had less drying to do. And so we see a 13% increase or probability of returns to November planting normal harvest. And again, 23% here for that November planting. So again, October early is definitely the better management strategy for the probability of increased net returns for that strategy. So we can see that increase there of roughly 10% chance just with having storage to have that October planting and early harvest strategy payoff. Now moving on to the final management strategy, keep wheat or cut for hay. Okay. The economic considerations that we need to think of first is obviously prices. What are you going to get for that bale of wheat? What wheat prices will you be receiving? What soybean prices? And why you say, why is that important? Well, if we bale wheat now, you're able to plant soybeans earlier and therefore better yields. So also need to consider what those expected yields, wheat yields or bales, how many bales can be produced per acre. We need to think about nutrient removal. Okay, our AGR1 says that if we remove wheat through baling, we have 4 pounds of P2O5 per ton and 20 pounds of K2O per ton removed from the soil. So we need to take that into consideration. Harvest cost differences, right? It doesn't cost the same to harvest wheat for baling or harvesting wheat for grain. There is a difference. So that needs to be considered. Wheat drying and storing costs. Okay, if you harvest for bales, you're not going to be drying wheat and storing. So there's some potentially savings there with that. And then days gained to plant soybeans. So that increased soybean yields we talked about. So some key assumptions, we're looking at $50 per bale, 1,100 pounds per bale, soybean prices of $9 a bushel. And I have this wheat price in here as a range from $4 to $7 a bushel. And so We'll look at some sensitivity analysis there. Wheat yields, again, we're going to vary those yields from $30 or 30 bushels an acre up to 100 and look at sensitivities there. We're going to look at 3.5 bales per acre. We're going to look at, for that nutrient removal, at 30 cents per pound of PTO5 and 33 cents a pound for K2O. And then we're going to look at these differences in harvest and hauling costs. And then we have a drying cost here of basically 5 cents a point, and we're going to look at drying 3 points removed. So what you see here is, remember I mentioned we're going to do some sensitivity analysis. On the left-hand side here, you have varying wheat prices, varying 50 cents starting at $4 a bushel up to $7, and then anticipated wheat yields given what you may experience at the farm level given this freeze event. What we are assuming here under this scenario is that you gain 2 weeks in soybean planting, so that benefit is also attributed. So I know this is a lot of numbers, but what I want you to pay attention to is what's in green, okay? Those are the scenarios for which baling wheat will pay for itself, okay, instead of taking it to market. So what you see is we have to have really low yields and coupled with really low pricing. What I also want to mention here is not considered is any government payments based on crop insurance from a loss in wheat yields. So if you anticipate, for instance, a government payment coming back more than $46 an acre for your wheat payment, baling under these scenarios is not going to pay. So you should keep your wheat crop. Okay. Here we want to look at the weeks gained. So how many weeks you can gain on your soybean planting on the left-hand side, and with wheat yields going across the top there. And what we can see here is given that wheat price, you really need to get up there in weeks gained for baling to pay for itself. Okay, so there's all sorts of combinations you can obviously look at with this these sensitivity analysis, but again, all indications right now are pointing toward keeping your wheat unless it's a total crop loss right now. So hopefully that's not the case. But as Carrie mentioned, the next 10 days are going to be critical to keep scouting on that. So in summary, intensive wheat management, use higher seeding rates and in-furrow phosphor practices will struggle to pay for the most part. October planting and early harvest wheat has that potential, especially with drying and storage like we already do. Consider the risk and return for each management strategy. Look at those probabilities of that it potentially paying, and make your decision accordingly. And finally, wheat prices and these yields have to be substantially lower, and days gained in soybean planting has to be high to considering baling wheat early. So with that, I appreciate your time and you sticking in here with us, and I will take any questions from the group.
Okay, do we have more questions for Jordan? I'll say I appreciate Jordan, in the spirit of an actual field day, wearing a ball cap today.
Well, with this, with everybody having long hair these days, I figured it's best to cover it up too anyway.
Well, I thought a ball cap might give it a little bit more of a field day feel, but that's also a pretty pretty pragmatic reason as well.
So I have a question from Shane about harvest and straw market economics. I think we had some farmers out in across the state identifying some potentially market opportunities with this $50 a bale estimate for baling wheat straw. So this was it is an option out there for farmers. I don't know how large it is, especially these large bales for feed. So if there is an opportunity in the area, check prices. Again, we just used a $50 a bale assumption. If you can get more, then obviously these economics change. But again, it has to me, it has to increase substantially to be considering this practice, especially when we consider these government payments coming in.
And Jordan, you've got some, you've got some ballpark estimates you put together on a little Excel file. I'd imagine if somebody like Shane wanted to borrow that and try it out, you can, as a starting point. That'd be okay.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a tool that I put together. I haven't posted it online yet. It was last minute given the scenario. So you can, anybody feel free to reach out to me. I'll send it out to the agents to think about this. Again, it's rude and crude, but it gets the job done. How about small squares? Okay, small squares. That's typically a market for our central Kentucky producers in the horse industry. Given the quality nature of this wheat potentially coming out of this, we typically have demand for it, and there typically is a good market if the quality's there and can be harvested correctly or baled correctly. So especially wheat straw. There is some markets that are out there for the landscaping industry that typically want these small square bales. So I would just call around your local area, because obviously what we didn't look at here is transportation costs on a lot of this. So if you're a farmer and have to haul these bales yourself, there's some significant cost on that. But on my website, there is a baling wheat straw tool that is available that does account for all of those elements. So please feel free to download that too.
Okay. Jordan, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. I see some more questions coming in, so go ahead and answer those. But I'm going to go and launch a poll, and I'm going to launch two different ones. I forgot to ask just a basic question about how many acres people manage and farm and such. And so I'm going to hit that poll first, and then I'm going to come back and get the economics poll. But feel free, Jordan, to go ahead and answer.
Yeah, yes. Caitlin came in, was talking about her grandfather harvesting wheat and then baling behind windrowing behind a combine, basically for small squares. And yes, again, the demand is definitely high for the horse industry, especially if you can do it to their specifications, because there's very particular about the type and quality of those that wheat straw coming in for the horse industry.
Okay.
Yep, Matea is coming in saying same thing.
I noticed that was in past tense. So it probably means once Matea was out of the house, the straw bales went away as well. I guess. So in my case, we